there's 3 members off with the driver and all. They're just put in mode, taking them into custody here.
All right, so we're back for episode 25 of the Code Podcast. And today I got my friend Sam Ferguson going to be coming on. I met Sam several years ago at the Kentucky State Police when we did a seminar down there for Justin Rundles and their staff, and his staff, I should say. And immediately liked this guy right away. There's a lot of people out there that have been doing this kind of thing for a long time, but there's not a lot of up and comers, it seems. And Sam's one of those up and comers. That's kind of the younger generation, much younger than me, that is. And I loved seeing what he was doing. And actually, all the octopus guard I know, I learned from this guy, actually. So,
Yeah.
Sam, welcome
Yeah,
on.
so Ferguson.
What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. Sam Ferguson. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in second degree. And fought MMA, started wrestling when I was 8. When I was a kid, I wanted to do karate, but mom said no. She didn't like the idea of Oriental mysticism, I guess. And so she put me into wrestling because that's what she said all the tough people did. And here I am now, trying to be a tough person. And I became a cop 9 years ago in Lexington, Kentucky. Love the jobs. Very glad to be doing it still.
Awesome. Now, how old were you when you started wrestling? Would you say? How old?
8.
Well, and you're still
Yeah.
wrestling. You're a
I
wrestling
was in
coach
third
now,
grade, so I was
correct?
8 years old. Yeah, I coach a high school. We've got the state tournament on Thursday and Friday. I've got my heavyweight and my 157 pounder qualified.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
wrestling is so great.
yeah, I love it. I really think it's the most important martial art, whether you're wanting to be the police or fight MMA, right? Because especially folk style wrestling, where it's all about being able to get on top, hold people down, and then get off the bottom. Because that's really kind of the cornerstones of winning any of the fights that we are in, right? If we're talking MMA, we want to be able to get a takedown or keep from getting taken down and hold somebody down and not be held down. And same thing for policing, right? We want to hold people down and get them into handcuffs. And if we end up on the bottom, we don't want to be held down.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've been telling my students for years, I'm like, I love jujitsu. I do it full time, and I think it has a lot of answers to a lot of things. But ultimately, when it comes to especially teaching police, I think it's way more valuable for them to have basic wrestling skills than to have, a mere bit, a bunch of jujitsu skills. Because I think that uh, being able to control the clinch, being able to control that element of the fight, it dictates the path of the altercation. You can either keep it on the feet or take it down at your discretion.
Definitely, right? One of my MMA coaches back in the day, he described wrestling as the special teams of MMA, right? You can win you're going to need an offense and a defense, right? You're going to need to be able to grapple effectively on the ground. You're going to have to be able to strike on your feet, but you can set up yourself with great field position with a good punter or a kickoff team. And
Yeah.
that's really the way I think about it, right? It's only one play, right? But that can really change the momentum of the game.
So when you started wrestling, at what point did you move into jiu-jitsu? How did that happen?
Um, so I started jiu-jitsu when I was probably about 19. I'd graduated high school and was going off to college, and I had some buddies that were fighting, and they needed somebody to wrestle with them. So I would go in, help them get rid of fights, just doing like wall wrestling and stuff like that with them. And I was like, you know what? I want to do that. Started doing jiu-jitsu because of that and wanted to fight MMA.
Yeah. Now, how many fights did you end up having in MMA?
10.
10. Wow.
I was
What
nine
was your
and
record?
one.
9-1. Wow.
9-1. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nine and one
that's
in
real good.
MMA, 4-4 in boxing, 2-0 in Thai boxing.
That's great. That's awesome. Now, at what point did you decide, hey, I want to be a police officer? And then when you became a police officer, what was your initial reaction to the training they gave you in the police academy based upon, hey, you're not just some regular person. You have years and years of wrestling and stuff. So what was your outlook on it when you got there?
Um, so I was actually going through and reading like my like personnel report because I have interview for a different department within our agency,
Mhm.
and they said that I struggled with the DT, and like the only thing we were really taught was PPCT, and like I guarantee you, I just checked entirely out. And was like, why am I doing this? Do people really think that these pressure points are going to lead to some magic form of compliance all of a sudden? And I was very much less than impressed with what we were taught. We were taught the PPCT system almost verbatim. We did some groundwork, which was gauge, ground avoidance, ground escapes. And I was quite frustrated by that. We had a bunch of people that had never trained jiu-jitsu trying to teach people how to shrimp, and you could tell that they had never really done it against a resisting opponent or somebody who really knew how to do it effectively.
Yeah.
I'm trying to what else I can say about it. Yeah. So they actually didn't give me a good score in DT, and they did not change anything. And I talked to the training sergeant about it afterwards, and we had a conversation about how basically they were not happy with the DT program, but they weren't sure what they were going to use to replace it. And since then, my agency's moved on to GST, which is definitely a step in the right direction, but it's not necessarily what I think is always the best, right? At least the way I was initially showed what they were teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I got hired in 1997. And when I went to the academy, I was already training then. And when I went to the academy, they did PPCT. And I was like, what is this? Because I went to the academy thinking, oh man, this is going to be amazing. There was going to be great. There was no social media back then, no YouTube. So I had no
Yeah.
idea what the academy training was going to be. I just heard it was supposed to be good. And when I got there, I was so let down.
Yeah. They act like they're going to teach you how to fight, but don't ever make you actually fight. And
No.
I understand how it got to be, but this time I get very frustrated with it because I'm like, are these people, like I understand they have to teach certain things, right? Because that's is, but had they never like watched, especially like body cams were rolled out, I think the year before I got to the academy, or at least our agency had. And I was like, have you guys not watched any footage of officers fighting somebody? Because I have not seen anything in footage of officers fighting that looks anything like what we're doing right now. Like you think that if nothing else, you would see that what people are doing kind of organically is working out pretty well. Maybe we should try and figure out what it is, right? And I read a report a while back. It was like the 90s. It was like basically a breakdown of every use of force that wasn't lethal that LAPD had. And like 95% of the time, the takedown they said they used was either a trip or a tackle. Nobody ever mentioned a straight armbar. They might have mentioned it once, but it was like, then how come they aren't teaching us how to trip and tackle people?
Mm-hmm.
Like that should probably be what we are focusing on instead of transport wrist locks.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's one of these things too, where I think that for many, many years, it was just, the person that was teaching the DT in most places had no significant background in any kind of combatives. And they just went to the course because, they were the one sent and they were going to be the one teaching and they needed the certificate, so to speak. And they came back and just
Yeah.
verbatim showed whatever course they were shown. And, most people going to the academy aren't like you. Most people just follow suit and oh, this is what they're showing us, and they don't have the background you would have, and they just believe that it to be true. And like, hey, this is not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely frustrating. You always kind of wonder how things got to where they are. And I think that it's probably I think it's going to get better. I think that it's also one of those things that a lot of times the people that go to training, like the training division for your department, aren't necessarily the guys that are into fighting. They're the people that are a little bit more, for lack of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
career minded and are looking at it as the stepping stone to go to the next spot within the department. And working in the training department is a good way to kind of keep your nose clean, right? Not get and just kind of the regular, trouble you're getting into being a patrol cop, right?
Hmm.
You're not going to have people complaining on you. You're not going to have any of the black marks that could possibly come from being patrol when you're in training. And it allows them to progress their career within the department as far as like promoting to sergeant, lieutenant, whatever the next step for them is.
Yeah.
And it also gives them a chance to have a lot of face time with the higher ups brass, right? Like the commanders and the lieutenants are going to talk to them a lot more than they will the guys on patrol.
Yeah.
So it gives them a chance to kind of hobnob with the brass a little bit.
That's a great point. I never heard anybody put it like that. That's actually a great point. It's a resume builder, is what it is.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
resume
Like,
builder. Yeah.
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 And
Here's a
I think
question
that
that go ahead. I didn't mean
I've
to cut you
got
off.
some friends that are in training now full time, and they're not necessarily super big into the hands-on stuff. They're a lot more shooters, but they're great guys, and they all love training. I've got one of them started training jiu-jitsu just a little bit ago at a gym the next town over from where I live.
Hmm.
So it's headed the right way, and I think that some of the guys we have in training right now are very much trying to do things the right way and not looking at it just as I'm there solely to build my career, like I think some of the other people have been there for.
Hmm.
And I think that, our department's headed in the right direction. And especially, it's also kind of interesting to me the dichotomy between firearms training and, what we normally think of as DT, right? Before you go to any of the firearms instructors classes, you have to pass a qual to even just start taking the class. Is there anything like that for DT? Right? Like we got some guys that are running specifically our DT program who are pretty good, but we got some people that haven't. It's like we have people before they get ready to shoot, which is a relatively low frequency event that I can tell you are paying out of their own pocket to go to all these training classes. They go out and compete in shooting matches. I go out and compete in shooting matches with them whenever I can. But it's not really the same thing ever happened for fighting. And I'm not sure why they focus so much on the low probability event of being an officer involved shooting, which is probably something we need to focus on, but why there's such a higher standard held for the firearms training as opposed to the fighting that we're actually going to do almost, maybe not every shift, but at least once a week, once a month, they're going to be putting somebody in handcuffs that doesn't go into handcuffs. And there's just such a difference between the people that are teaching the fire and the people that were teaching the DT when I went through the academy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's always been a big problem. We've actually addressed that pretty significantly up here in Connecticut. So when people want to become a defensive tactics arrest and control instructor in the program that we use in most places up here, which is the Officer Survival Series, when they come to the course, they cannot become an instructor unless they can physically prove to us on the mat throughout the 8 days that they have a background in this kind of
Yeah.
thing. Did you wrestle in high school and college? Did you fight MMA? Did you have jiu-jitsu experience of at least a blue belt or higher, or judo background? You have to be able to show us that you have a significant grappling background that we are going to put you under pressure, and you're going to have to prove it to us. And like the last class, we had 35 people in the class, and it was a smaller class, 35, and 4 people got an instructor certification. So, we don't mess around with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you are a shining beacon to me of how things should be run, right? If you can't show up and fight, you shouldn't be trying to teach other people how to fight.
No,
That simple.
period.
You know what I mean? But sometimes there's a
Going into
golden
that
child that gets
topic,
picked.
going into that topic, I got a couple of questions from different people that have either know you well or have met you. And from the first combative summit, that's where we also met down there
Yeah.
in Florida. I brought Bill Forster with me, otherwise known as Wild Bill Brasky.
Yeah.
This is from him. This is from Bill. He makes
Okay.
the best knives, by the way. Have you ever got one of his knives?
No, I haven't. I keep on meaning to order because I'm into Bowie knives. I
Yep.
keep on meaning to have him make me one. And then I get sidetracked by some other shiny object. I'm like, I need to go do this. And then I forget about ordering the knife. But I'm probably actually going to do that as soon as I get off here. I got to remember now to
He's
order.
legit knife
Yeah.
maker.
All this stuff looks awesome. I've seen some of his brass knuckles, but
That's
I'm more of a
crazy.
Bowie knife than a brass knuckle guy.
So this is from Bill. It says, from your experience working in the combatives world, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see in how law enforcement trains for the entangled fight? Specifically, once a weapon is present or involved, what should instructors be doing differently?
Um, so I think that a lot of departments really just entirely ignore it, right? So when I was going through the academy, one of the things they did is like they wanted to see if they could stump me, right? And so we were doing gauge portion, and they had a guy try and produce a pistol on me from bomb side control. And, I instinctively say, oh, that probably something I don't want to have out of his pocket. So I'm pinning it in place, trying to figure out what my next move is. And the training sergeant just starts yelling at me. He's like, you need to just get away, and shoot him. I was like, yeah, right. Like at some point, this guy was going to probably need to be shot, right? But more important than, I don't really care if he dies. I just don't want him to shoot anybody else, right? So I think that sometimes they focus a little bit more on control. I mean, less on control than they should, right? We should always kind of start, I hate to say playing defense first, but that's kind of how I think about it, right? Since we can't, automatically start shooting, we need to think about controlling and deciding and giving us time to decide whether or not this is going to be a lethal threat or how we want to handle this, right? I think that they tend to neglect the idea of controlling first and then moving from there. Not everybody, but that's kind of been my experience so far with it. Is whenever I see people talk about it, it's always they just immediately relinquish the control they have and try to just immediately go to a different option, right?
Yeah, I would say that's very, very accurate because I actually just met with some of the people in Connecticut that have to decide whether or not police officers would be charged in the use of deadly force. That's their job, and I demoed extensively to them that in a in-fight a weapon access situation in that clinch environment or in that very close proximity environment, that once you've established control to, and when I first got hired, they would teach you to break from that control, go to cover, and then try to return fire as you moved, right? And we have found through years and years and years of watching body cam and from our own situations we've been involved in and from simunitions that as soon as I break from this person, it is a drag race to who kills who first. And more than
Yeah.
likely, it's going to be them getting me.
Yeah, they've already got the advantage. Their hands already on the gun, right? I want to,
Yeah.
and like I was, so I was just teaching a class yesterday, uh, and one of the things that I was telling them is whatever we do, right, we need to disengage from a position of dominance, right? That could be we get behind them and shove them and then start doing whatever we think the right thing to do is next. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can take them down, be unentangled, or we fall them to the ground and keep control of the weapon bearing limb. But whenever we exit, we need to make sure that we are exiting safely after we've already established some form of control, right? We can't just say, oh, crap, there's a knife, and just start backing away from him. Because even if we do shoot him, we're getting stabbed and pieced up, right? And I do not want to spend time in the hospital.
No. No, and it's very few places teach this kind of thing. I mean, outside of Craig Douglas, outside of Redbeard Combatives, outside of guys like you and Chad Lyman maybe, and us, I believe, and there's a few other places that are doing this kind of thing. um there's not a lot of us out there doing this. If you look around the country, maybe there's 15 to 20 groups that are good doing this.
Yeah, I think that even saying there's 20 people that are doing this might be a little bit generous, right?
I am being generous. I'm being very, very generous.
Yeah. Um, yeah, for some reason, this has always been a neglected area, which is very unusual to me, right? Because you think that if, as police officers, right, we want to get, guns from people that shouldn't have guns and drugs off the street, right? If we're not going to plan on just talking to everybody through the muzzle of a gun and we're going to go hands on, we're going to potentially have to grapple somebody who's going to have a gun or a knife on them, right? It's
Hmm.
just part of the game, and it's not something that ever was discussed, right? And one of my pet peeves will kind of tie into this is every academy you go to, they're always like, you got to control the hands. But it's just like a mantra, like you got to control the hands. Like, okay, how do you want me to control the hands, right? What is our strategy to control his hands until we are certain that we go on to the next step, whatever that is, right? And it was never really discussed anywhere outside of until I started training with Craig and
Hmm.
Ryan and the whole Shivworks guys. One of the I was very lucky in that I got turned on to Craig Douglas' material very early on. One of his original Shivworks crews guys, I went from white to black belt with. And so once I became a cop, Larry told me, he's like, hey, you need to go train with Craig. And I kept on kind of putting it off. And finally, I did. And one of the things that led to me deciding that I was going to need to do this was I was pinning a guy, working to get him into handcuffs, and his hand went to his waistband. And I was like, okay, like I didn't think anything about it, right? Because the idea of grappling where there might be a gun or a knife present wasn't really a thought in my mind at the time. I was, a year or two on, if that. And he goes to his waistband and I'm like, okay, whatever. Like he's digging an underhook. I know what this is. I've wrestled, I've done jiu-jitsu. And so I use that to set up my corner. I ended up getting in handcuffs. And after we got in handcuffs and searched him, he ended up having I don't remember what kind of gun it was, but he had a gun that had slipped down into his like gooch area, right?
Hmm.
And the only reason why I'm alive probably is because he didn't have a holster and his gun slipped out of his waistband and he couldn't get to it. Right. And
Hmm.
that was a very much an eye-opening experience for me. Right. Like, oh man, everybody, these gunfights I'm potentially going to be getting in aren't going to happen at 3 yards to 15 yards. It's going to very potentially be while I'm trying to hold somebody down or we're wrestling on our feet.
Yeah. I think the statistic the FBI has always given for years is somewhere between 0 and 6, 0 and 7 feet contact distance is most police shootings, and
Yeah.
you know, I found that to be
Yeah.
true.
I think the number I read on was like 65% of them happen from 0 to 3 yards.
Yeah.
Like I don't have them happen to zero and have them happen to three, but even at 3 yards, if you go to full extension, he's right on your pistol, right?
Yeah. Very close.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, that was
God.
kind of the. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
No, no, I go ahead.
Uh, yeah. So that was the beginning of the class. One of the classes I teach, pinning in the weapons based environment. That's ways of controlling their hands so we can frisk them prior to cuffing. Because anytime we go to cuff somebody, we almost always are going to lose track of one hand for a little bit while we're getting that first hand put on the back, and we fight for the second hand after that. So I would much rather be pretty certain there's not a gun or a knife on him prior to me moving to cuff him, because he's got that
Hmm.
one hand that I can't track for a second, and I don't want to find out if there is one there the hard way.
No, exactly. Here's another good one. So Justin Rundles, this is from him.
Oh man,
He wants to get your opinion on this. Justin's a great guy, Kentucky State Police, and has been involved in teaching recruits for many, many years. He said he wants to know what you think is where the biggest gap between academy training and the reality of the streets fall. Like, what are we not doing in the academy that they need when they hit the road?
so we've already touched on the weapons based stuff,
Yep.
but I think grappling in unusually confined spaces,
Hmm.
right? I've had to fight guys in the, a trailer in the little kitchen area of a trailer was one fight, and there was just no space. Like once we hit the ground, like I couldn't even get to like side control. I had to move to mount because there wasn't room for us both to be laying perpendicular to each other in there, right?
Hmm.
And I think that grappling in, steal some Craig Douglas words, unique and novel confined spaces is something that we don't do in the academy. It's hard to do, but I think there are definitely ways we could set up very, very confined spaces, right? Like Kerry Murakami, his idea of Cato's closet, where,
Hmm.
where he makes you fight in like a phone booth, basically,
Hmm.
is not taught that we need to do a better job of. It's hard to do, right? Because most of our training happens in a mat room, just like you would for regular sports jiu-jitsu practice. But we need to have the idea of we are going to be in very cramped, confined quarters, right?
Hmm. Yeah, that's true because a lot of academies that they are doing a lot of academies now are pretty jiu-jitsu or grappling based, but they're
Mm-hmm.
wide open mats with all this room, and they're not putting people in cars, they're not putting people in between vehicles, they're not putting people in like, you know, really tight apartments and stuff with furniture and stuff, and that drastically changes what you can do when that environment changes.
Yeah. Um, yeah, like I was gonna use the example I had of fighting that guy in the trailer or wrestling that guy in the trailer wasn't really a fight. Then a lot of the stuff we do, we end up catching people in between cars and stuff like that, right? And whenever the cars are almost bumper to bumper, there's just no room for the two of you, right? And there's another car on the other side because you're in a parking garage. There's no place to do all the usual activities that we would want to think about, right? And we need to have an idea for how we want to handle somebody in those very, very tight areas.
Yeah. I think one of the guys doing it and has been for years and years and years is Cliff. He does it between the Connex boxes with Hill County Combatives. He's
Yeah,
always having them fight in tight spots like that.
yeah, yeah. The Connex boxes he uses is awesome.
Yeah. Here's
I think
a
that's probably the.
question. What's that?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say here's a question, but I'm not going to tell you who it's from. He wants me to. He said if you can guess it, great. But I can't imagine you won't guess this. I heard Ohio doesn't have horses. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh man, uh,
I gotta
I could
explain this
not
to me
guess who
because I
that
have
could
no idea
be.
what this is about.
Yeah. So funny story. They don't have horses in Ohio. Like they just don't allow them there. I don't know why. They caught me. Turned me right around the border.
How did
Uh,
this come to be?
so I was teaching a class at Genetti's gym,
Yep.
and I was talking about how I like to pin and side control, and I really focus on having good heavy head pressure.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, I know you guys don't have horses here because I was thinking like in Kentucky everybody's got horses, but in Ohio, you don't have the Kentucky Derby, you don't have all the same horse racing culture we have here. And I was talking
Yep.
about how a lot of times farriers and vets, whenever they were trying to hold down a horse, right? Like I couldn't hold down a horse if I was lay on its chest, but if I lay myself on its head, I can hold the horse down. Was the example I was using, and so it turned into like I just honestly believe that there are no horses in Ohio that they just don't allow them there. So it's kind of become a running joke. And whenever I get my shirts made, my logo is a rooster, and
Yep.
it's going to be a rooster riding a horse, and it's going to say we're not in Ohio anymore.
For those of you that don't know, it's Aaron Genetti, Knife Control Concepts. He's in the Columbus, Ohio area. Great guy. That was his question, obviously, for you. He has another one. Don't worry. He said, I'd
Oh,
like to
good.
ask him about his thoughts and concepts around pinning for law enforcement tactics and strategies that are overlooked. I think I'd have interesting thoughts on getting a program started. He just started teaching seminars 3 years ago, and he wanted to know how you went through the struggles of starting a program for yourself. So, for example, Galo Combatives Group.
Yeah,
How did that all start for you? How did you get it going, being a fresh person starting it?
yeah. Well, I'm still pretty fresh. I'm he. You'd probably give him a much better answer than I could, Rob. Um, so I think that for me, I wanted to start small, right? Like I was very comfortable with teaching jiu-jitsu classes, they're about, or in seminars, they're like, usually somewhere between 2 and 3 hours long.
Mhm.
And so I started off reaching out to, cops and, just people I knew that ran jiu-jitsu gyms that were also self-defense minded. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to get this started. I'm wanting to teach classes about grappling the weapons-based environment. And so I did a lot of 2-hour classes at kind of the start of it before I started doing a lot more 1 and 2 day classes, because I wanted to make sure that I could put out the best product possible, right? And
Mhm.
I, I've got like everybody else, I got a little bit of that. Am I good enough for this going on? I could. And so I thought that if I can just put out, little 2-hour blocks, and then I can start working and adding those onto each other, all of a sudden I've got, what should be a good 3 day course. And so that's kind of been my strategy. I didn't want to be the restaurant that has 1,000 things on the menu and they all suck. I wanted to be, the restaurant that had 5 things on the menu, but those are the best daggone meatloaf you'll ever have, right?
Mhm.
That was strategy. So far it's worked out good, and it's yeah, that's the best advice I can give you is stay within yourself and start slow and just slowly build onto it, right?
Yeah. No, I think I've gotten to see you teach a few times in front of some big groups too, especially at the Kentucky State Police. That was a big group. And
Yeah.
I was very impressed with your teaching ability. I thought you were a fantastic instructor. And I'll be honest, like when you first started to teach, because that was more of a sport jiu-jitsu thing, when you first started to teach and you started to go into octopus guard, which I hadn't seen a lot of yet, I was like, oh, where's this going? And then I was like, wow, this is pretty good. Like, and by the end of it, I was like blown away. I remember going back to my
Yeah.
students and like made them do it for like the next 6 months. So, but no,
Yep.
you were a very good instructor. The way you worked the room, the way you talk to people, the way you explain things. I thought you were a phenomenal instructor. And like I said, when the podcast first started, there's a lot of like OGs out there doing this kind of thing, teaching law
Yeah.
enforcement, but there's not a lot of new guys. And even though you got almost a decade on the job, that's still new compared to a lot of the people that are out there teaching. A lot of the people out there
Yeah.
teaching are Jurassic narcs like myself that we're probably running off to the sunset the next 5-10 years, but we need people like you to take that baton and carry it into the future.
Yeah. I'm really glad that, not glad, right? I'm very fortunate that I feel like right now is going to be a big turnover in the law enforcement training world, right? A lot of the guys that I know that are currently teaching are retired, right? Or at least that are running bigger training companies. I don't know anybody that's running a big training company that is also still in like their early years of their police career, right? Like I guess I got 9 years on now, so I'm kind of getting in there. But there's not everybody I know that's teaching like on a bigger scale. They're all retired, right? With the exception of Chad, he's still active. He's still on the payroll for Vegas.
Hmm. Yeah, office job, but he's still there, and a busy office
Yeah,
job at
I'm
that
saying,
because he's
yeah,
dealing with
he's
all
still
the,
employed by,
you
yeah,
know, you know,
yeah,
no, no, that's very true. I think that to do both, and I did both for years, and
yeah,
it's pretty rough. I mean, I've been retired now 2 years, and I was able to go and do a lot more after I retired, obviously, because when you're working the job and you're getting forced to double shifts and you got caseloads and you got everything else going on in your life, it's pretty hard. And then on top of that, if you run like you teach wrestling and probably everything else you do, it's a lot to juggle.
yeah, and gotta give my wife a good shout out. She usually gets mad because usually I make fun of her on podcasts or stuff like that. But no, she is fantastic, right? I'm like every other cop. I work, my 50 hours a week, give or take. And then I own a jiu-jitsu gym. I coach high school wrestling. Like and I have Galo too. So I am always doing something. It drives her up the wall sometimes because I'm not home very much, but
Yeah, but you're building something for your future too. So when you go to retire, you'll be
yeah,
able to walk right into something. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um,
in 15 years, give or take, when I retire, hopefully Gallo's up and running really strong. And I can do that full time, and then I'll have the jiu-jitsu gym as well, right? Kind
Now,
of
where's
do.
your school? Where's your jiu-jitsu gym?
It's in Richmond, Kentucky. It's about 30 minutes, give or take, south of Lexington.
And what's the name of it?
MCC,
NCC?
Madison County Club, is what it was initially.
Nice. And
Yeah.
mostly jiu-jitsu, or do you have MMA program or striking or wrestling or?
Um, so we're hooked in with CKWSC, Central Kentucky Wrestling Club,
Mhm.
and we don't really have an MMA program because it's very frustrating dealing with people that say they want to fight,
Yep.
right?
Everybody walks in, they're going to be the next UFC champion, right?
Yeah. Then like you got guys that will say it and they'll come in a couple practices and then they'll be gone for 3 weeks, and it's
Hmm.
like, buddy, like if we're gonna play brain damage sports, we better be ready for it, right? I'm not gonna put you out there if you're just gonna get hurt. And like if you're gonna fight, I expect you to be, we'll if you want, we'll strike 3 times a week and we're gonna grapple 3 times a week when you're not in camp, right? You have to be training as close to year round as you can, right? I understand you're gonna have like, a week here and there where you're gonna be on vacation or you got something come up, but if you're going to fight, it's not something you can do half-ass. You have to be into it and stay after it year round. Because if you're not, you're going to be getting pretty beat up, right? Like even like amateur MMA, it's at least in Kentucky, it's the exact same as pro MMA, just no elbows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're just going to take just as much of a brain damage as if you were to be fighting pro MMA, just you're not making noticeable money, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I
if
always
you're
tell my
going to,
guys, if you want to be good, you got to, it's part-time effort, part-time results, full-time effort, full-time results,
yeah, right.
period.
Yeah, no. So yeah, but I've got a couple guys that are thinking about taking some fights, but they do a good job showing up jiu-jitsu. But whenever I'm like, all right, we're gonna hit pads today, I don't put it out to the guys that are fighting, like, all right, if you guys want to fight, we need to strike. We're gonna have, our, you know, pad work and sparring day. And like they always have something come up. I'm like, buddy, like if you want to fight, awesome. Like I want you to fight. I miss being in the MMA world. And but don't tell me you want to do it, then not do it, right? Don't be the
Yeah.
guy that just says, yeah, I'm an MMA fighter. No, no, you're not, right?
You're a poser.
Yeah, right. You might show up like, once or twice a week to wrestle around with your buddies, but don't say you're an MMA fighter if you're not actively training and or fighting, right?
Exactly.
I
Now
get frustrated.
going back to Gallo, what is the names? How did you come up with the name and the logo? How did you come up with that?
Uh so uh Gallo is Portuguese for rooster.
Okay.
So the old school Carlson logo was a fighting rooster that didn't have any
Hmm.
I can't remember what they're called, gaffs. Didn't have any gaffs on it.
Hmm.
And if you look really close at the logo, the rooster has gaffs on it. A gaff is like a 3-inch blade that they put on their
Hmm.
spurs.
Yep.
So I wanted to kind of give a shout out to, like my lineage through Carlson. And I wanted to
Hmm.
show that we're actually using weapons, right? So that's why I put the make sure my rooster had the gaffs.
That's pretty cool.
So it's
I
kind of
always
the
like the
integration of
Yeah, I always
grappling
like to
with and
see
without weapons.
the why how people come up with that. Like I was talking to Kato about his, and he's Japanese descent, and the samurai is built into it and everything. It's pretty cool
Yeah.
to see how you guys come up with your logos and stuff. I thought it was interesting, and I didn't know that about that's why you had that. So I thought that was interesting to know. I had
Yeah.
another question for
Unfortunately, I don't
combatives.
have a cool name
What's
like
that?
Rectitude.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny too. He took him a long time to come up with that name. He said he sat around for weeks and weeks and weeks. He couldn't come up with anything, and he just happened to open up a book, and that was the first Bushido code value.
Yeah,
And he's like, "That's it, right there."
yeah.
So pretty
No.
interesting. When it comes to the Combatives Association, I know you're a big part of that. How did you? I
Mhm.
got introduced to the Combatives Association through Craig. I'd known Craig for years
Yeah.
before that, and Craig would always come to my place, still does. He was just there not too long ago, and he's like, "Hey, you need to come down to this. You need to come to this." How did you get introduced to it?
Um, so I just joined the Facebook group, I think, or John added me to it.
Okay.
Um, and I just get involved with it that way is probably the easiest way of explaining it. And then, I was already kind of well known, not necessarily well known, but I was vetted by Craig as well, right? And then I had some, you know, some like other things we can like, check in on, right? Like I'm an active duty cop, which doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be good at fighting and training people.
Hmm.
But I'd had the MMA background. I'd had a pretty dang successful jiu-jitsu career. Um, and so there's a lot of things that you could kind of like check. Well, this guy, he can at least do it, even if he can't teach it. And
Hmm.
then it kind of worked on from there. And yeah,
I think the Combatives Association is fantastic. I know that every time I deal with them, I kind of feel like they're in a niche that a lot of places aren't doing. They're taking
yeah,
the elements of all these martial arts that they love, things like wrestling, things like jujitsu, and they're saying, "Hey, we're going to be honest with ourselves and say it isn't the answer to everything. We have to be, put it under the pressure of the weapons-based environment and show like what really works and what doesn't work." And I don't think that there's too many places doing that outside of that. I don't really know of anyone else
no,
doing that.
I'm trying to think of people I know that are deeply involved in that aren't at the association. Um, yeah, right now off the top of my head, I can't give anybody that I would necessarily recommend that's really involved in it.
No, no. I think it's a great organization. I told Cato the same thing when I first went down a few years back. I expected there to be all this kind of riff while we were there, be all these different big personalities, and
No,
as you saw, like there was nothing
yeah,
like that. It was everybody got along fantastic. It was great.
no. I mean, I think that it is very unique in that we all get along as well as we do, right? Like if we were to have that same thing within just like jiu-jitsu, there'd be all kinds of tribal infighting within the group. And that is
Mhm.
not a thing, right? I think that all of us just love what we're doing so much and are vetted good people that we all just say, all right, like if there's something we disagree on, if it's a technical thing, we can figure it out, right? If it's something else we're having a disagreement on, we'll probably be able to figure it out because it's not that big of a deal. And if it is, we'll handle it, right? I
Yeah.
think that just kind of that willingness to be vulnerable, like in evolutions and like, or what we're going to call it, force on force training, really helps with us being aware that we don't have all the answers as much as we try to, we don't, right? And so we're all very willing to learn from each other and we're all still trying to figure this out.
Yeah. Where else are you going to go and see some of these names all in one room that easily could go run courses on their own? And they're training with each other. They're putting themselves under pressure. They're allowing themselves to face loss. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there's zero ego with it. The room's full of people
No.
grappling, rolling, fighting over, training weapons.
Yeah. I don't know. There's no way there could be anything to compare to as far as the level of instructors, right? We have Craig teaching a block, Jerry teaching a block, Jerry Wetzel. He's a great guy for knife defense. That's his specialty. And
Hmm.
then we have Janetti teaching a block, Cole Miller teaching, just tons of great people that you wouldn't be able to go train with like if you're, I was going to take a week to train with Cole, go take an ECQC with Craig, and then I go down to Hill Country with Cliff. It's just an entire year of training to get exposed to all of them, right? Like I'd be gone
Mhm.
every weekend to go train with all of them, but we all get together, and we all collaborate and teach a little bit of what we think is our best stuff. It's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
experience.
And a shout out to John Valentine because really he's the unsung hero in it all. He does so much putting everything together, you know.
No, yeah, John puts in a lot of great work, and Nori helps out a lot too. Nori's awesome.
Yep,
His wife.
exactly. Yep. What do you, we're almost done here. I just want to ask you if you could change, I asked Cato the same thing. If you could change anything in law enforcement right now, what would you change? So you have a direct line to whoever the shot callers are, and whatever you want changed, they're gonna do. What would you do?
All right. So I think that I would want them to find ways to take some of the load off of patrol, right? Like if your department's big enough to have specialized units, then you should have those specialized units do what it was instead of just kicking more and more things back to patrol. So like within my agency, we've just seems like we've done nothing but add more steps onto patrol, right?
Hmm.
Um, we've like we have probably twice as much different paperwork to do now than we did before, right? And like there's some stuff like anytime we have a domestic violence, we are to file the warrants ourselves and do that before the end of shift. And we have an entire set of detectives that solely work domestic violence. And I don't know into all's into their caseload, but do you think that the people that sit in the office could do that while we have to go take calls instead of tying up an officer for 1 to 3 hours of his shift to finish his NIBRs, his JC3, and then go file a warrant and do all that stuff, right? It ends up being 3 hours if it's the guy's gone or female's gone in the domestic.
Yeah. No,
And
so
I would
you want
like
to
to
you want to
see, yeah, I just want them to take some of the, for lack of a better term, like administrative stuff off of patrol because it ends up turning just becomes a lot for us, right? If you want us to answer all the calls that we have in Lexington, which is a pretty busy town, and then do also a lot of the other detective type stuff, it's like nah, it's kind of just gets to be a lot. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And granted, of course, I'm worried about carpal tunnel, so I try and write as few reports as possible.
Yeah, so I can 100% agree with you there on taking some of the load off patrol because they are the backbone of everything that's happening. And uh, an idea that I was given by my dad, rest in peace, he was in the military, and he gave me this idea years ago when I was the first a cop. He's like, I don't understand why they don't have an extra squad. So he's like, why don't law enforcement have, instead of three squads for patrol, why isn't there a fourth? And the fourth squad can rotate through training every week. So in other words, like you have extra people. So A squad's working days, B evenings, C is third shift, but that fourth squad is
Mhm.
rotated out, and now they're in training for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is,
Yeah.
whatever the rotation would be. And now they go on hands-on skills, shooting, tech medical, stuff like that. They get off the road, away from the stress, and they get to train. And you have more training throughout the year, and that would be an interesting concept if something like that could work. Um,
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, everybody's short staffed. Right?
Yeah, we can't get people. They've demonized the job so much, nobody wants it. But in a perfect world, remember, perfect world, you could do what you wanted. It would be an interesting way to handle it.
Yeah. I never really thought about it that way. One of the things I would like us to do is so for Lexington, there's usually we have two squads working each shift, right? Or each shift and
Hmm.
sector. On Thursdays and Fridays, when we have three squads, I would like us to potentially say, all right, the first 4 hours of your shift or the last four, we're going to do some form of training. I mean, it could be, something as simple as working, we're going to watch pre-assault indicators, right?
Hmm.
Watch footage of officers, either from our department that watch the body language of somebody that either fought us or ran from us, so we can do a better job of recognizing that, right? I'm a big fan of the pre-assault indicators because for police officers, if we can get ahead of the eight ball and go ahead and start closing the distance and put them in cuffs, it's going to either save us from being assaulted or end up in a crazy long foot pursuit and then get road rashed up on your hand like I just did. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big weakness of jiu-jitsu and just martial arts training in general. So many martial arts schools advertise that they're teaching people self-defense, but slap bump is the start of every match on the
Yeah.
ground. You know what I mean? And it's like that's not how your fight's going to start. If you get into a fight at the gas station parking lot and some homeless guy goes to jump you while you're pumping the gas, it's not going to be that way. It's going to
Yeah.
be something way different than that. There's going to be possible conversation, possible just blitz attack, possible, environmental considerations. There's all these things that happen, and they're never really talked about in a martial arts school unless they have
Yeah. It's
someone like
always,
yourself teaching.
yeah, it's always equal initiative at
Yep.
practice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
We've all agreed on this. We're going to put on our gloves or we're going to put on our rash guards. We're going to wrestle or fight. Right. And that's not the way it actually goes.
no,
I've
no. I
never,
would make the argument that a lot of martial artists wouldn't even have any idea how to read somebody in the street unless they have worked in law enforcement.
yeah. I agree with that 100%. I think that, you know, not that they wouldn't do once the fight was going on, but they would be caught off guard, like, especially like, your average jujitsu person, let's say, right? They, be like, like totally caught off guard because we're just not used to the idea of reading body language a lot of times. And also just the idea of that things aren't always going to happen the way that they've always happened and being, polite and respectful people.
Yeah.
Right.
They're not used to
But
confrontation.
yeah.
Like actual confrontation. They're used to mat confrontation. They're not used to
Yeah.
confrontation out in public.
No, yeah, yeah. Definitely. That's what I was kind of getting at. I think that they're just not used to that idea, right? And all of a sudden their heart rate goes from, 60 beats to 180 before they know it. And just because that adrenaline spike, they gas out much faster. No different than like people that are new to it. I feel like that still happens for people whenever it's an unexpected fight.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree totally. When I was a detective for a long time, and I worked plain clothes in some like nightclubs and stuff. And I remember responding to a fight on the floor. I was watching from above, and I saw the fight break out. I could see it break out before it broke out. But as I got down to it, everybody's pandemonium, everybody's leaving. I got down to the guy, and he was a very, very well-known local grappler
Oh
at the
yeah.
time that would annihilate everyone in the room if he just had a grappling match. But he got his ass kicked by two punk
Oh
kids that would never have been able to beat him on the mat. But
no.
they worked in coordination. They worked when one gets him, talking to him, the other one hits him from behind, and then he's on the ground, he's getting stomped, and it's like one of those
Oh
things
yeah.
where it's the biggest lie in the martial arts. It's like, you think you know how to fight until you're put into that environment where shit happens and it happens fast.
Yeah. It needs to be in the proper context, right?
Yep.
Like love jujitsu, but I think that one of the things I make my guys do at my jiu-jitsu gym is every month we take a week and we turn it into MMA and combatives, right? Everything we do is going to have striking, and we're probably going to add weapons in at some point as well, right? And if we don't add weapons, then we add multiple attackers, right? So we get to use the idea of changing both our pacing and strategy, but also just like entirely like the concepts of it, right? Like if we were working leg locks, I might use that leg lock to get him off balance, right? Like get him so I get underneath him, then use that to scramble up to my feet, right? We
Mhm.
need to think about how we want to disengage from those situations a little bit more and just kind of changing it, repurposing some of the things we're already practicing every day for jiu-jitsu and repurposing it for self-defense because jiu-jitsu, as much as I love it, especially the way it's taught now, is not self-defense.
No, it's not like when I started, and I'm sure not when you started. Jiu-jitsu, when I started in the 90s, every class had striking in it. Every class had, clinch work in it, up against the wall or the cage. Like that was what it was. It was, and it's luckily I think in our school we still mix it in a lot like you do, but there's so many that don't. Most
Yeah.
do not. Most do not.
No,
No.
like whenever I got into jiu-jitsu, like I was saying, it's because of MMA,
Yep.
and everybody knew that trained jiu-jitsu was basically either fought MMA or had previously fought MMA, right?
Yep.
And it's just been an interesting change, right? From it being an art used for MMA, being an art just entirely on its own, that people will become black belts and never been punched in the face, right? It it's just been a wild change from jiu-jitsu for Valley Tudo, back whenever you could soccer kick people and do all of that, to we can't even reap the knee anymore. You know what I mean?
It's happened to every martial art that's ever come up the pike, though. It happened to the karate in the 70s. It happened to judo. It happened to, it's happened to everything that's come before. Been watered down.
Yeah. And Matt Larsen has a really good bit about that. And that while we definitely want to be good at, jiu-jitsu, right, for competition, because I love competing in jiu-jitsu, I love doing that. But we have to make sure that we're kind of keeping our true north, is how he describes it, of
Hmm.
being fighting, right? An MMA fight's not the same as a street fight, like we were talking about.
Hmm.
We need to always have our idea of what we want to be using it for at the end game, right? So for me, my primary use of jiu-jitsu now is going to be arresting people that need to be arrested, right? So I want to make sure that I'm always thinking about how I want to be using that for that application at the end of the day, right? There'll always be times where you're going to kind of switch your focus, right? Like before Nogi Worlds, I'll probably think a lot more about how I want to pass guard than I do whenever I'm thinking about how I want to play jiu-jitsu. I'm saying play jiu-jitsu, how I want to use jiu-jitsu for work, right? Like
Hmm.
I've never had a pass. I'm sure there's been times when I've had to step out of somebody's legs, after I've taken them down, but I've never really had to put any time into thinking about a pass in a fight at work. But
You
whenever
and me
I'm,
both. 25 years, I never passed anyone's guard in the street.
yeah,
so, so,
it's very much a jujitsu for jujitsu skill. And even if you watch MMA, it is not something people think about, right? I think that it's almost easier to hold somebody down from inside their guard, and especially their half guards a lot of times, than it is whenever I pass all the way to side control, right? If I just want to hold somebody down, a lot of times if you just stay in the half guard, right? Like a Turk in wrestling, like Randy Couture talked a lot about it back whenever me and you were just starting, is that's what he would do. He would just sit
yeah.
half guard. And that's a lot of what the Dagestani guys are doing. They're using a lot of more stuff that looks like wrestling rides to me. And they're also doing some interesting stuff with how they are tangling up the.
You froze up on me. You there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're freezing up on me.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but I
Yeah.
agree with the whole guard thing, and even go back to like legends like Tito Ortiz. He didn't pass the guard; he just stayed there and elbowed the guy in the face, right?
Yeah. Right. And John Jones, I mean, like he's got
Yeah,
submission wins,
yeah,
but he he would sit in people's guards. And remember, like they would grab his wrist and he'd just roll over the top and drop that elbow on their face.
yeah,
I think that, yeah.
yeah. Different world, different rules. I always say rules of engagement. That's what I tell my students. What are the rules of engagement in the arena that you have to perform in? Is it a IBJJF match? Is it an MMA fight? Is it a street fight? Are you a cop with a gun on your belt? Like which one are you? What's your rules?
Yeah, no, I use the exact same thing, right? Like exact same wording and everything like that. Like,
Yeah.
and one of the things like I talk a lot about too is most of us, we only get somewhere between 4 and 12 hours of training a week, right? Like that's usually kind of where I sit. I'm a little bit heavier right now because I get out and I wrestle with all the high school kids every day. But every week, you get somewhere between 4 and 14 hours. So how do we pick out what is going to give us the biggest return on our investment for those 4 to 12 hours, right? If
Hmm.
you're wanting to be a police officer, probably the one of the lower returns on investment is going to be spending a lot of time working Thai boxing, right? Like as much as I think that Thai boxing is great and you need to do it, maybe we should be focusing more on how we're going to hold people down, right? Or
Exactly.
whatever other option you want to pick. I'll spend a whole lot of time focusing on playing a guard game that's going to be heavy on triangles, right? So you have to think about how you're going to get the best of your 4 hours.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is if you're going to be teaching cops and you're teaching a bunch of people that don't train, they're going to see no value in some of that stuff anyways. But if you show them something they know they can use that night, that's when you get buy-in.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think that you need to show them stuff that they know they can use later on and then make them use it, right? Like if you're not having evolutions or making them actually do it against a resisting opponent, they're probably going to walk away and be, I don't know about that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So like all the classes I teach, we always have evolutions of some type in there.
Yeah. Prove it to them, and then they will come back to the watering hole for more knowledge.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. Well, I know you got to get going. I get you got practice again, and you got to work, I'm sure, later. So I was really awesome having you on. I really appreciate you coming on. I apologize to you and to the listeners. I know we've had some internet in and out a few times.
Yeah.
So we got a blizzard here yesterday. There's 2.5 feet of snow on my roof in my school here, but hopefully that's not
Do
the
not miss
problem. But
that.
yeah, you don't miss that. You were originally from Chicago, right?
Central Illinois, and then I moved up to
Central.
Chicago.
Yeah.
That's how I got hooked with the Carlson teams. I trained at Junior's Gym for about 7 years.
Yeah. Well, I'm still stuck in New England, so I still have the snow. But anyways, hey, I really appreciate having you on. Hopefully get to hook up with you this year and do some training. And it's always great to see you, man.
Yeah, I'll message you afterwards, but I need to come up and take your course. I haven't taken it yet. And I've been meaning to. It just keeps on getting pushed back and pushed back.
Oh, we got a really good opportunity coming up if you're interested. And if anybody out there is interested, Massachusetts State Police is going to have the course. And normally the 8-day course that we do, which has all like the court, the courtroom testimony and all that, all the scenarios, all that mixed in, that normally is done in like 2 to 3 days a week for like 3, 4 weeks in a row, which
Mhm.
makes it tough for people like you to come. But
Yeah.
Massachusetts State Police is going to host the entire 8 days. It's going to be Tuesday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, Monday to Thursday, and they're letting people stay at the academy and for rooms. They don't have to get hotels, so they can stay right there at the police academy, which saves a lot of travel.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
that'd be a big for me. I'll shoot you a text.
all right. Well, thanks a lot for
Yeah.
having
Thanks
you.
for having me on, Rob. I really appreciate it. Good talking to you, buddy.
You too. Thanks a lot, man.